The sun hung low over the small African village, casting long golden lines across the dusty paths. Children played near the river, women cooked outside their homes, and the smell of smoke and fresh herbs filled the air. It was a quiet place, peaceful, old, and protected by traditions that stretched back farther than any living person could remember. And in the middle of it all walked Cato. Everyone knew him. Everyone heard him before they even saw him. He was 22, strong, full of swagger, and known for his loud laugh that echoed through the village like a drumbeat. His skin was deep brown, his steps were quick, and his smile always carried a hint of challenge, as if daring the world to try him. Cato was the kind of young man who believed nothing could touch him. Not danger, not spirits, not consequences. He loved showing off in front of the other young men. They followed him around, listening, laughing, and repeating his jokes. And Cato always had one target in mind whenever he wanted attention. Mama Uri. She lived at the edge of the village in a round hut covered in vines and dried herbs. People called her a witch, though most showed deep respect when they said it. She was old, no one knew how old, and her eyes always looked like they could see straight through a person. She healed the sick, spoke to spirits, and guided the village in times of trouble. Most people stepped aside when she walked by, but not Cato. To him, she was just an old woman with strange stories. And every time he mocked her, he felt the other villagers watching him, half amused, half terrified. One warm afternoon, Cato stood near the center of the village with his friends. They were talking loudly, cracking jokes, enjoying the shade from a tall mango tree. When Mama Uri walked past, carrying a basket full of dried plants, the group fell silent, except for Cato. He smirked and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "There goes Mama Uri with her magic leaves," he said, waving his hands dramatically. "Careful, everyone. She might turn us into goats." His friends burst into laughter, though some of them looked around nervously, worried she might hear. Mama Uri paused. She didn't turn her head, but she stood still for a brief moment. The air shifted slightly, almost like a soft breath passing through the village. Cato felt it, but ignored it. He kept laughing, louder than before, pretending not to notice the growing unease around him. Some women shook their heads. A few elders muttered prayers under their breath. Even the children stopped playing and stared with wide eyes. But Cato walked away proudly, feeling like he had won something. Still, deep inside him, there was a strange tug, a tiny whisper of unease. He shook it off quickly, telling himself it was nothing. Just silly traditions. Just old superstitions. He didn't know it yet, but that small moment, his laughter, her pause, the shift in the air, was the first crack in a door he never meant to open. A door that would soon swallow his certainty whole, and take something he never thought he could lose. The next morning, the village was quieter than usual. A thin fog rested over the ground, and the air felt cool even though the sun had started to rise. Cato walked down the narrow path with his usual confidence, humming to himself as birds chirped overhead. But he noticed something strange. People weren't greeting him the way they normally did. The women who usually smiled at him kept their eyes low. The men who often joked with him stayed busy with their work. It was as if the entire village wanted to avoid being too close to him. Cato brushed it off. "Let them be superstitious," he muttered. "I have no time for their fears." He kept walking toward the river, kicking small stones along the way. Then, from behind a cluster of tall reeds, Mama Uri stepped onto the path. She moved slowly, leaning on her wooden staff. Her long gray hair hung over her shoulders in thick braids, and her eyes were calm but heavy, like someone who carried too much knowledge. Cato froze, surprised. She rarely came out this early. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. The village air seemed to hold its breath. Mama Uri finally spoke, her voice low and steady, almost like the wind whispering through dry grass. "Cato," she said, "you walk loudly, but your spirit walks blind." He frowned, trying to decide if she was insulting him. Before he could answer, she stepped closer, her gaze fixed on him, not with anger, but with deep sadness. "Do not mock what you do not understand," she warned softly. There are forces older than your pride, older than this village, even older than me. Cato rolled his eyes, trying to hide the small jolt of fear her words sent through him. Mama, he said loudly so that a few passing villagers could hear, I respect you, but you take these things too seriously. Spirits? Curses? Shadows that watch us? We're in a modern world now. We shouldn't live in fear. His voice echoed along the path. A few villagers stopped to listen. Some shook their heads quickly and walked away, not wanting to be involved. Others stayed, nervous but curious. Mama Nurai didn't react to his tone. She only looked at him with tired eyes, as if she'd seen this kind of arrogance many times before. Cato, she said again, more quietly now, remember this, even that what you do not believe in can still believe in you. The air around them suddenly grew colder. Cato laughed loudly, breaking the tension. Believe in me? Are you saying spirits follow me around like hungry dogs? He spread his arms wide and spun in place as a show. Look, do you see anything behind me? A few young men nearby laughed with him, though their laughter sounded forced. Mama Nurai lowered her head, as if the moment hurt her deeply. Without another word, she walked past him, her staff tapping softly against the ground. Cato smirked and shouted after her, Don't worry, Mama. If a spirit ever shows up, I'll ask it to bring me breakfast. This time, no one laughed, not even his friends. Something in the air felt wrong. Heavy, tight, uneasy. Cato noticed, but pretended he didn't. He waved his hand as if chasing away a fly and continued walking. But as he stepped further along the path, he felt a sudden breeze sweep across his back. The hair on his arms stood up. He stopped and looked around, expecting to see someone behind him. Nothing, just the still morning air. He shook his head again and moved on. Superstition, he muttered, but the strange things didn't stop. Later that day, as he walked past a row of houses, he noticed shadows flickering on the walls even though no one was moving. At the well, a sudden cold wind brushed across his face, though the sky was perfectly clear. Animals, dogs, goats, even chickens, acted strangely around him, avoiding him or staring with wide eyes. He felt chills, but he refused to admit he was nervous. There's always a reason, he whispered to himself. Just bad luck, just the weather, just normal. But inside, something small and silent began to tremble. He didn't know it yet, but the unseen world had already taken notice, and it had begun to follow him. The morning the world changed for Cato did not look any different from the others. The sky was clear, the fields quiet, and the air warm enough to promise a long, peaceful day. Cato stepped outside his home, stretching his arms with his usual confidence. But something felt slow, heavy, like the air around him was waiting for something. Cato ignored the feeling and started down the path toward the edge of the village. His mind was already planning how he would spend the day, maybe teasing his friends, maybe showing off with a joke or two. But a few steps along the road, he noticed something strange. His shadow seemed off. At first, he couldn't explain it. It wasn't missing. It wasn't gone. But it wasn't behaving like a normal shadow either. It didn't move with him exactly. When he lifted his arm, the shadow lifted its arm, but a second too late. When he turned, it swayed like it was underwater. He blinked and rubbed his eyes. What is this? He muttered, forcing a laugh. Am I still half asleep? He stepped forward again. His shadow dragged behind him, like someone pulling a cloth through mud. Cato stopped cold. His heart thumped once hard against his ribs. Maybe the sun is strange today, he said quietly. He glanced up, bright, clear sunlight. Nothing unusual. He took a deep breath and moved again. The delay grew worse. The shadow lifted its foot after he did. It turned its head after he turned. And now, its shape seemed less sharp, as if edges of it were shaking. Cato's throat tightened. He tried to shake the fear away. It's nothing. It's nothing, he whispered. Just a trick of the light. But deep inside, something cold and heavy settled in his chest. A warning he refused to hear. He kept walking, faster this time. Then it happened. As he stepped into an open clearing, the sunlight hit him in full. His shadow stretched long behind him. But then, it didn't stop stretching. It kept growing, stretching farther and farther, long past what was normal. The shape grew thin, then wide, then flickered like a flame. Cato froze. His breath caught. The ground beneath him felt like it tilted slightly, though he didn't move. He stared as his own shadow lifted from the ground like black smoke peeling away from a fire. It gathered itself, thickened, and rose, slowly, until it stood beside him. Standing, separate, alive. Cato's mouth fell open. His whole body trembled as he took one step back. The shadow stayed where it was, its form dark and smooth like ink. It had no eyes, no mouth, no features, but somehow Cato felt it looking at him. His heart raced faster than it ever had. What is this?" he whispered, barely able to breathe. The shadow tilted its head slightly, as if studying him. Then, without a sound, it turned its back to him and began to walk away. Cato stumbled forward. Hey, where are you going?" The shadow didn't respond. It didn't look back. It simply continued walking, its steps steady, calm, almost graceful, its shape sliding across the ground like smoke being dragged by the wind. Cato felt the world closing in around him. His chest tightened, and fear slammed into him so hard his knees weakened. "No, come back, come back." He reached out, but his hand grabbed nothing but warm air. His shadow kept going, and then it vanished into the trees. Gone, completely gone. Cato collapsed onto the dirt, shaking. Sweat dripped down his face, though the morning air was cool. His breath came fast and uneven, like he couldn't pull enough air into his lungs. He scrambled to his feet and looked down. There was no shadow beneath him, not even a faint outline. A scream stuck in his throat. He turned and ran toward the village as fast as he could, stumbling, breathless, terrified. When he reached the first row of houses, people looked up at him. Their eyes widened. Mouths fell open. Some dropped what they were holding. A woman screamed. A man stepped back, crossing himself. A child cried and ran behind his mother. Cato looked down again. Still no shadow. He felt naked, exposed, unreal, like something essential had been ripped out of him. His pride, his confidence, his boldness, all of it shattered in an instant. The villagers whispered words he had only heard in old stories. Cursed, marked, soulless. Cato wanted to deny it, to shout that everything was fine, to pretend this wasn't real. But it was. His shadow, the part of him that had always followed, always stayed loyal, was gone. And Cato had never felt more alone. Cato tried to move through the village as if nothing had changed, but every step reminded him of the truth he didn't want to face. His shadow, his silent companion since birth, was gone. And without it, he felt wrong, like a drum missing its beat or a body missing a bone. From the moment he woke the next day, the world felt colder. A deep chill clung to his skin, even when he sat near the cooking fire. It didn't matter how close he held his hands to the flames. He never felt fully warm. His body felt lighter than it should, almost hollow, like something inside him had been scooped out and left empty. Walking took more effort than before. Even simple tasks left him tired, as though his strength leaked out of him little by little. He tried to hide it at first. He forced loud laughs at the well. He walked with his usual swagger through the village. He spoke boldly, pretending everything was fine. But people didn't look at him the same way anymore. Women hurried their children indoors when he passed. Young men who once admired him now stepped away, pretending they didn't see him. Old men watched with heavy eyes, whispering to each other about punishments from the spirit world. And no matter where he went, Cato heard one word over and over. Cursed. The children were the worst. One afternoon, as he walked past a group playing near a clay hut, a little girl looked down at the ground near his feet. Her eyes went wide, her face twisted in fear, and she screamed, "Mama, he has no shadow." Her cry tore through the air like a blade. Cato's heart dropped, and he instinctively stepped back. He wanted to tell her it was okay, that there was nothing to fear, but the words died in his throat. Because maybe there was something to fear. That night, he lay in his hut, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt a strange presence around him, like something watching him from the darkness. Something he couldn't see. Sometimes he heard faint whispers. Other times he felt a weight pressing on his chest. At moments, he even felt like something was brushing past him. He tried to convince himself it was in his mind, that stress or fear or exhaustion was playing tricks on him. But the nightmares began soon after. In one dream, he saw his shadow standing at the end of his bed, its head tilted, its body swaying like smoke. In another dream, it stood outside his hut, waiting, patient and silent. He always woke up gasping, drenched in cold sweat. Soon, he began avoiding sleep altogether. But exhaustion always caught him. Then came the day he realized things were even worse than he thought. He was walking along the edge of the village, feeling drained and dizzy, when something in the distance caught his eye. It stood in the tall grass, barely visible, shaped like a human form made of darkness. His breath hitched. His stomach dropped. It was his shadow, far away, watching him. It didn't move. It didn't hide. It simply stood there, facing him, silent and still. Cato blinked hard, hoping the shape would vanish. But when he opened his eyes again, it was still there, waiting. He took a few steps backward, shaking his head. No, this can't be real. But the more he looked, the more he knew it was real. And the strangest part? It didn't feel angry. It felt disappointed. The next day, he saw it again. And again, sometimes at the edge of the forest, sometimes near the stream, sometimes just inside the village fence. Always watching, always silent. Cato felt shame curl inside him like a snake. He remembered his mocking words, his arrogance, his laughter at Mom and Uri. He wished he could take back every joke he had ever made. For the first time in his life, Cato understood what true fear felt like. Not fear of danger, but fear of himself. Fear of what he had become. Fear of what he had lost. And mixed with that fear came something new. Humility. A small seed of it, weak but real, began to grow inside him. Because deep down, Cato knew this wasn't a punishment from Mom and Uri or the villagers. It was something deeper, a punishment from himself. Days passed, and Cato grew weaker. The cold inside him spread deeper, settling into his bones. Walking felt like pushing through thick mud. Even breathing sometimes felt heavy, like the air around him did not want him anymore. He knew he couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. He had no shadow. He had no peace. And the thing that used to follow him everywhere now stood at a distance, watching him with silent judgment. Finally, after another sleepless night filled with whispers and strange dreams, Cato reached a breaking point. His pride, once the strongest part of him, was now cracked and crumbling. He needed help, and there was only one person who might understand what had happened. Mom and Uri. The thought alone made him swallow hard. He had insulted her, mocked her, humiliated her in front of the village. Going to her now felt like swallowing fire. But fear was stronger than his pride. Shame was lighter than the cold emptiness inside him. So, early one morning, with shaky legs and trembling hands, he walked toward her hut at the edge of the village. Villagers watched him go. Some whispered. Some pitied him. Some turned away, not wanting to witness what might come next. Cato raised a hand to knock on her door, but his hand shook so badly he had to steady it against the wall. Before he could touch the door, it opened on its own. Mom and Uri stood inside. Her eyes were calm, but there was no kindness in them, only deep knowledge and old understanding. Cato tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Mom and Uri, please. I need help. She looked at him fully then, taking an emptiness beneath him, where a shadow should have been. Her face softened, but only for a moment. Your shadow has abandoned you, she said quietly. The bond is broken. Cato's chest tightened. I know. That's why I came. I can't live like this. Something is wrong with me. I feel cold all the time. And he swallowed, it watches me. Mom and Uri stepped aside, but she did not invite him in. The spirits see all, she said, even the disrespect of a proud young man. Cato dropped to his knees right there in the doorway. His hands pressed against the dusty ground as tears filled his eyes. Real tears, not the dramatic kind he used for attention. Mama, I'm begging you, help me. I didn't know this would happen. I didn't believe any of it. She looked down at him, But her expression did not soften again. "That is the problem," she said. "You believe only in yourself. You mock the forces that protect this village. You call them foolish, harmless, weak. But these forces do not need your belief to exist." Her words cut deep, sharper than any blade. Cato bowed his head lower. "I was wrong. I was stupid. Please tell me what to do." Mama Nurai shook her head slowly. "This is not a wound I can heal for you." Cato's heart sank into his stomach. "Why not?" "Because your shadow did not leave out of anger," she said. "It left out of disappointment." Her voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper. "It is the spiritual mirror of your heart. It witnessed your arrogance. It carried your pride. And when you became too heavy with self-importance, it refused to walk beside you." Cato felt tears spill onto the dirt. He clenched his fists, shaking. "Mama, I can't get it back on my own." She stepped back inside her hut, only her face still visible in the doorway. "You must face yourself, Cato," she said. "Only then can your shadow decide to return. Not because you fear the consequences, but because you change." Her next words were final. "Leave, Cato. The journey ahead is yours, not mine." She closed the door gently, but the sound of it felt like thunder in his chest. Cato stayed kneeling outside for a long time, crying into his hands, his breath shaking, his pride shattered. For the first time in his life, he felt truly small. But somewhere beneath the pain, a new feeling formed. A beginning, a small spark of courage shaped by humility. And with nothing left to lose, he knew he had to follow it. Cato walked away from Mama Nurai's hut slowly, each step heavy, as if the earth itself was holding onto his feet. Her final words repeated in his mind over and over, echoing louder than the village drums. "You must face yourself. Your shadow left out of disappointment. The journey ahead is yours." He didn't know what any of it truly meant. All he knew was that he could no longer stay in the village. The air there felt too tight, too full of eyes watching him, judging him, fearing him. As he reached the edge of the village, Mama Nurai's voice suddenly called out, not loud, but firm enough that it carried through the wind. "Cato." He turned. She stood outside her hut one last time, staff in hand, her eyes deep and unreadable. "If you truly seek your shadow," she said, "it has gone to the forest of echoes." Cato froze. The name alone sent chills up his spine. Even children avoided jokes about that place. It was said to be a border between the living world and something else, something older, quieter, and far more dangerous. Mama Nurai continued, "It is a place where the physical world touches the spiritual one, where the things you hide inside yourself become loud, and where the things you fear most take shape." Cato swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he asked, "How do I survive it?" She shook her head. "You do not survive it by strength. You survive it by truth." Before he could ask anything more, she turned and went inside. The door closed behind her. Cato stood alone. No weapons, no guidance, no shadow, only fear and a painful spark of humility growing inside him. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The path to the Forest of Echoes was narrow and wild. The trees grew taller the farther he went, bending over the trail like giant hands trying to hide the sky. Birds stopped singing as he approached, and the air became colder with every step. Cato hugged his arms around himself. Even the sunlight felt different, weak, as if the forest swallowed it before it could touch the ground. The deeper he walked, the heavier his body felt. At times his legs trembled, and each breath came out shaky. A strange silence wrapped around him, swallowing his footsteps, making him feel like the world itself was listening. Then the whispers began. At first they were faint, like wind slipping through cracks. But soon they grew clearer. "Arrogant, mocker, coward, you brought this on yourself." Cato's heart pounded. He spun around, expecting to see someone behind him, but the path was empty. The voices were coming from the trees, or maybe from inside him. He pushed forward, sweating despite the cold. Each whisper cut deeper, reminding him of the people he hurt with his pride, reminding him of the laughter he used as a weapon, reminding him how many times he ignored warnings. With every step, his shame grew heavier. Soon, he reached a part of the forest where the trees twisted into strange shapes, shapes that looked disturbingly human. Some had branches like bent arms. Others had knots that resembled faces, frozen in silent screams or sorrowful frowns. Cato felt as if thousands of eyes were watching him. He tried to look away, but the shapes seemed to change when he wasn't watching. A branch shifted, a knot pulsed like a heartbeat. A shadow passed between the trees, even though nothing was there. Every step felt harder than the last. His legs felt like stone. His chest ached from fear. But he kept going. The voices grew louder, now whispering memories, his memories. The day he mocked the old woman near the well. The time he insulted a man who came to him for help. The laughter he threw at Mama and Uri like stones. Each memory flashed in his mind like small flames burning him from the inside. Cato fell to his knees, shaking. He covered his ears, but it didn't help. The forest echoed with every mistake he ever made. He wanted to run. He wanted to hide. But he remembered Mama and Uri's words. You must face yourself. So he stood again, legs trembling, breath broken, and took another step deeper into the darkness. Because somewhere in this forest, beyond fear, beyond shame, his shadow was waiting. And he could not turn back now. Cato walked deeper into the forest of echoes until the path behind him vanished completely. The trees grew so close together that their branches locked like ribs in a giant chest. The air was thick and hard to breathe, as if he were walking inside someone's lungs. He could no longer hear birds, wind, or footsteps, only his heartbeat. And the whispers, they grew louder with every step. You think you're strong? You laughed at those who feared the unseen. Now look at you. Cato squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, trying to calm the shaking in his hands. I know I was wrong. He whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to, the forest or himself. After what felt like hours, he reached a clearing. A soft mist covered the ground, swirling around his feet like fog coming from a cold river. The trees here stood tall and silent, as if guarding something sacred. Cato stepped forward slowly, his heart pounding so loudly it echoed in his ears. Then he saw it, standing in the center of the clearing, motionless, waiting, his shadow. But it was no longer the shape that once followed him quietly. It was taller now, almost twice his height, darker, so dark it looked like a hole cut into the world, and heavier, its presence pressed on his chest like a weight. Cato's breath caught. The shadow slowly turned toward him, its edges rippling like smoke trapped inside glass. Though it had no face, Cato felt its eyes, his eyes, locked onto him. He felt exposed, small, unworthy. Why, Cato whispered, voice trembling, why did you leave me? The shadow tilted its head slightly, the same way Cato used to when mocking someone. The movement struck him hard, as if the shadow was reminding him who taught it that behavior. Then it spoke. Its voice wasn't loud, but it echoed from everywhere, around him, inside him, through him. It was Cato's own voice, but deeper, calmer, sadder. I walked with you through every mistake, every lie, every cruel word, and still you mocked the world that shaped us. Cato felt his knees weaken. He tried to step closer, but his legs felt like sand. I was foolish. I didn't understand. You didn't want to understand, the shadow replied. You loved the sound of your own voice. You loved the fear in others. You loved being untouchable. Each word hit him like a blow. Images flickered in the mist. Memories the shadow forced him to see. A boy he mocked until the child cried. A woman he laughed at when she prayed for her sick husband. Mama and Uri turning away in pain as he humiliated her. Cato covered his face with his hands, tears burning down his cheeks. Stop, he whispered, voice breaking. Please. I know I hurt people. I know I was wrong. The shadow stepped closer. The mist parted around it like it feared touching something so dark. You did not break because the world punished you, it said. You broke because you refused to look at yourself. Cato fell to his knees. He sobbed, not from fear now, but from truth. I'm sorry, he cried. I'm sorry for everything, for everyone I hurt, for the person I became. The shadow paused. For the first time, it felt still, quiet. listening. Cato lifted his face, tears streaking down his skin. His voice was soft, honest, and stripped of pride. I'm not begging because I'm scared. I'm begging because I finally see who I was. And I don't want to be that person anymore. Silence washed over the clearing. The forest seemed to lean in. The mist stopped moving. Even the air froze. The shadow moved one step closer, slow, controlled, almost gentle. It spoke again, softer this time. Then rise, Cato. He swallowed hard, staring at the figure that had once belonged to him. The path back begins with truth. The clearing felt larger now, as if the forest itself had stepped back to watch what would happen next. Cato stayed on his knees, trembling, wiping tears with shaking hands. His shadow, tall, dark, powerful, stood only a few feet away, its presence filling the air like a heavy storm cloud. For the first time, Cato wasn't afraid of it. He was afraid of himself, of the person he had been. The shadow's voice echoed again, low and steady. You want me to return, but why? Cato swallowed hard. His chest felt tight, but his voice came out clearer than before. Not because I'm scared, he said. Not because I hate being alone. I want you back because, without you, I can't pretend anymore. I see every wrong thing I did, every person I hurt, every lesson I ignored. I want to change, not so this curse ends, but so I can become someone worth walking beside. The shadow did not move, but the mist around it shifted, swirling slowly, responding to his words. Cato stood shakily, his legs weak but determined. He took one small step closer, placing his hand over his heart. I surrender, he whispered, not to fear, not to spirits, but to the truth of who I am. A deep silence fell over the clearing, thick, waiting, powerful. The shadow tilted its head again, but this time the movement wasn't mocking. It almost felt thoughtful. Change does not begin when you demand it, it said. Change begins when you release what poisoned you. Cato nodded, tears still slipping down his face. Then take it, all of it. My pride, my arrogance, my cruelty. I don't want to carry those things anymore. For a long moment, the shadow didn't reply. Then, slowly, deliberately, it began to shrink. The tall, towering figure folded in on itself like smoke collapsing, its shape becoming smaller, thinner, smoother. Its edges softened, its height lowered until it stood at the same level as Cato's own body. The mist around them brightened with a faint glow. Cato held his breath as the shadow stepped forward. It moved with calm purpose, closing the space between them until it stood directly in front of him, only inches away. Then, gently, it leaned toward him. Its form stretched like soft smoke, swirling around his legs, his arms, his chest. It felt warm, not cold as he expected. Warm like sunlight passing through closed eyes. Cato gasped, a wave of heat rushing through him, not burning but comforting. The cold inside him melted away. The emptiness in his chest filled with something strong and alive. He closed his eyes. The shadow wrapped around him completely, like a blanket made of light and darkness at the same time. And then, it slipped back into place beneath his feet. Cato opened his eyes and looked down. There it was, his shadow, calm, still, whole. He took a shaky breath, overwhelmed by the feeling of being complete again. But this time, the completeness didn't come from pride or power. It came from surrender. It came from truth. Cato walked out of the forest of echoes slowly, step by step, as if learning to walk again. The weight on his shoulders was gone, replaced by something softer, something warm. Each breath felt fuller. Each heartbeat felt steady and real. And beneath him, his shadow moved in perfect rhythm with his steps. For the first time in days, he felt whole. But he also felt changed. The man who entered the forest was loud, proud, and careless. The man walking out was quiet, humbled, and aware of every mistake carved into his past. When the village finally came into view, Cato stopped for a moment. He stood at the edge of the dusty road, staring at the cluster of huts, the smoke rising from cooking fires, the people moving about their day. His chest tightened with fear, not of curses, but of judgment. Would they accept him? Would they still fear him? Had he come back too late? He stepped forward anyway. As he walked through the village, people noticed him. Conversations dropped. Pots stopped clattering. Children froze mid-play. Their eyes went first to his face, then to the ground beneath him. His shadow stretched behind him, long and steady. A wave of relief and confusion rippled through the village. Some stared with wide eyes. Some murmured prayers of gratitude. Some simply backed away, unsure what his return meant. Cato didn't blame them. He had feared himself too. He walked straight to Mama Urai's hut. The door opened before he reached it, as if she had been expecting him. She stepped out, leaning on her staff, her face calm but carrying a faint spark of approval. Cato lowered his head. His voice was soft. "Mama, I found it." She looked at the ground beneath him, then back into his eyes. "I see," she said. "But what truly matters is not that you regained your shadow. It is that you earned it." He felt tears rise again, not from fear this time, but from gratitude. Mama Urai placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Walk wisely, Cato. The world is kinder when we do not walk against our own spirits." Word of his return spread quickly. Within days, villagers began speaking to him again. Children approached him carefully at first, then freely. Men who once laughed at his jokes now listened to his silence, sensing the weight of his change. Cato helped where he could, carrying baskets, fixing fences, preparing food. Not to prove himself, but because it felt right. Slowly, he became someone different, someone the village trusted, someone he trusted. The days that followed moved quietly, like soft wind across tall grass. Cato spent more time alone, not out of shame, but out of understanding. He would sit near the river at sunset, watching how his shadow stretched across the water, long and calm. For the first time in his life, he didn't see it as something that simply existed behind him. He saw it as something that had walked beside him all along. One evening, as the sky turned orange and purple, Cato placed his hand on the ground next to his shadow. The shape touched his fingers perfectly, matching him without delay or resistance. He breathed deeply. "There is more to you than darkness," he whispered. "You are the part of me I never wanted to see." Memories flowed through his mind, his pride, his anger, his careless laughter. The moments he tried to forget, the moments he pushed away, and yet his shadow had carried them all. It had followed him through every cruel word, every mistake, every moment of arrogance, until it could no longer carry the weight of the person he was becoming. Now it stood beside him again, not because he demanded it, but because he had changed. Cato looked at the reflection on the water, himself, and the shape beside him. He finally understood. A shadow is not just the absence of light. It is the part of the soul that holds your truth. The part that disappears when you lie to yourself, and returns when you finally face what you are. He rose from the ground, a new strength in his chest. Not the false strength of pride, but the quiet strength of a man who had met his own darkness and survived it. With a final look at his shadow, he whispered, "Thank you for coming back." And together, whole at last, they walked toward the village, ready for whatever came next.